Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Copbox. Today we are doing another installment of Forgotten N64 Games. I've got a selection of 4 games today that would be considered either lost or forgotten, or maybe just games that have fallen to the wayside of N64's history. So why don't we just jump right into the first game. Our first game today is Tonic Trouble. I wish I didn't have one with such a bunked up cartridge, but there's the box art for you. Tonic Trouble stars a man named Ed. He is a intergalactic janitor who ends up spilling this sort of magic soda juice. I don't entirely know. And it morphs all these creatures, mostly vegetable creatures, into these gross monsters that he has to go down and stop. Save the professor, build a machine, beat the game. It's a pretty fun 3D platformer, but it's a bit limited. It feels like it was Ubisoft kind of, dipping their toes in the water with 3D platformers at this time, because at that point, their biggest title was the first Rayman, which was a 2D side-scroller. This game comes across as what I kind of like to call an idea machine, where each little thing that you do in this game doesn't necessarily feel super cohesive, but more of like a, well, why don't we try a sledding section? Why don't we try this moving platform? Why don't we try this power-up? And it feels like it was just a chance for the development team to kind of mess with this sort of concept of how to build a 3D game. The ideas that here are creative, but it does feel a little bit disconnected across the whole game. Now, something you may notice for those of you who have played some other Ubisoft titles is that the way that this engine sort of works and the way the character moves is very reminiscent of Rayman 2. And yes, that makes a lot of sense. I can't confirm that it was made in the same engine, but I do believe it was made by a lot of the same team members at Ubisoft. Rayman 2 initially was going to just be a 2D side-scroller follow-up to the original, but after Tonic Trouble and they started working around with more 3D graphics and things like that, it got worked into Rayman 2: The Great Escape, which is one of the best 3D platformers out there, in my opinion. So Tonic Trouble is cool in the fact that it feels like it's this starting point of them trying things out, and you can see where it kind of built up and went from there to turn into Rayman 2. One thing I do want to touch on in this game is one of the power-ups. It's the popcorn machine. If you grab this, you'll eat it and turn into Super Ed. Super Ed can bust through enemies, rip open bars. It's just a fun little way to kind of engage with things. And I didn't realize this until I was getting the footage for this, even though I've played this game plenty of times as a kid, that the popcorn machine is actually a branded Newman's Own popcorn. Which I think is insane that the Paul Newman brand did a deal with Ubisoft to put themselves in Tonic Trouble. I love that. I love the sort of weird, very real brand placement inside of a game as absurd as this. When it comes to the legacy of this title, I think it's more about the history of the title more than the game itself. The game is not bad, don't get me wrong, but I don't think there's anything about it that I would call inherently outstanding or something that would make me go, you have to go pick this title up. Especially considering to get to the end game, you have to get every single collectible. You can't leave a single thing behind. And as someone who's played a lot of collectathons, although I do love a good 100% run, I just don't think that's a great way to do it for a first playthrough, at least personally. I like having the option of not having to grab every single little item just to make it to the end of the game. You can find this game probably for around $25, maybe a little cheaper if you buy it cosmetically flawed or just know the right place to thrift and look around. And for $25, I don't know if I would say this is a worthwhile game to pick up unless you just want it for the sake of what it is. But if you find a good deal on it, like $10, $15, I think it's worth it if you just want to sit down and play a unique little 3D platformer from Ubisoft's history.
Midway presents War Gods.
Our next game is War Gods. This was a fighting game by Midway Entertainment. And let me tell you, before I started working on this video, I had never heard of this game. It was recommended in the comments on a previous video, and I happened to find it for a good price, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, I mean, what better thing to put in a forgotten N64 video than something I've never even heard of? So this game is sort of a fever dreamish sort of combat fighter. It was Midway's response to Mortal Kombat. They wanted to get in on the fighting game craze at the time and brought some pretty unique stuff to the table for it. For starts, I think this game has gorgeous environments. It has such a specific 90s feel to how they're designed in the backgrounds with the detail. That's like the fact that it's a fighting game and it's just sort of a mostly two-dimensional fight really allows for them to do creative stuff with background art. However, one thing that bothers me about this game is I couldn't find a combo list on the pause screen. Maybe I missed something, but during the matches as I was fighting, I would check around to see if I could find some sort of combo list to let me know how to do my moves, and I couldn't, which it's like, if I'm playing a fighting game, especially one that's not like an established franchise or series or something like that, you gotta give me a combo list. I need to know how to do things, including this finishing move that it would be like, hey, you're ready, you can do the finishing move, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. I genuinely couldn't figure it out, and the closest I ever got is some of the computers did it to me instead. To complement the cool backgrounds and that weird sort of aesthetic this game has is definitely the character designs. They're strange, but creative. Like, this is something where I would definitely remember them if I had seen them as a kid, for better or for worse. They all have very unique and very outstanding styles that I think works well for a fighting game. You want your characters to feel strange, unique, and different. And the fun thing about the way those characters are done is Midway used what it called its digital skin technology to put that together, which I believe is a way of them like scanning real live actors and wrapping like a 3D print of them around like a 3D model, which is pretty cool. It looks a little bit weird, especially considering the dated technology, but I think that that's got a lot going for it just for what that means with this game and how it's built to have this. Like, Midway was clearly putting a big foot forward to try and do something creative with this. I managed to snag this game for about $10, which I think that that's pretty worth it for what it is. I don't think it's the most engaging fighting game out there, but with creative aesthetics, both for the backgrounds and the character designs, some fun music, and just a real simple, straightforward pick-up-and-play fighting game, I think it's a worth one to have in the collection just to pop out and show people things. Especially just to say, hey, did you know this game had digital skin technology? Because it's got that going for it, I guess.
Sci-Fi wins.
Okay. So our next game here is going to be Nightmare Creatures. It kind of reminds me of a mix of Tomb Raider and Dark Souls, in the sense that you kind of drop down and you have these awkward tank controls for your character and you have to go around and slice up all these monsters and get to the end of the level. It's really fun. The combat is super engaging. It takes place in this gothic sort of horror-esque depiction of London, and you get to choose your fighter to go through and beat up all the creatures, the nightmare creatures, most likely. Your options for characters would be Nadia, who has these double swords, can do these backflips and jumping around and slicing enemies in half. Or you could be Ignatius, who is a guy with a stick. I don't like Ignatius. This game has an impeccable atmosphere. It's dark, it's brooding, it's monstrous, it's scary, and it's so cool. The combat is really fun when you get the right move and you just slice a beast in half. And you can pick up different items that you can take around and use across the level. My favorite being what I dub the Indiana Jones gun, which means that if you are a little worried about your health and afraid of getting too close into the combat, you can just go like this. Something that I think is interesting about this game is it got praised at its launch. It was seen as like a must-have title for the N64. Hi. It was seen as a must-have title for the N64, which I also agree with, but after its launch, I've never heard much about it. I think it saw a little bit more success on PlayStation 1, but I feel like it just dropped off with attention. Maybe it's because it's a rated M game on an N64, which can be a little bit of a tough shot. One thing this game also has that I really want to point out is cheat codes. I miss the day of cheat codes when you could type in some random configurations of buttons and unlock cool stuff. Like this one has the most cheat code I can think of, which lets you just play as the monsters, which is awesome. They're kind of clunky and they're not the most fun, but that's the sort of thing that I would have gone crazy for as a kid. Out of all of these that I recorded this session, this was the one that I had the hardest time putting down because it was just so much fun going around chopping up monsters and beating up creatures. I think that it's so worth your time. That it feels like it moves like Tomb Raider, but it has that Dark Souls idea of you have to be a little more careful about timing your rolls and your dodges and your swings with your attacks. You can't just go in mashing the button. You gotta be a little more careful and time out your hits so you can get the kill. I got this game for around $20, which seems to be about what you could find it depending on the condition, and I think that is an absolute guarantee of a must-have price. If you find this game for $20 or under, even $25, I think it's an instant pickup. This game is so much fun. It's one of the few games on N64 that is rated M for mature. I also, I want to point out one of my favorite things about my cartridge is the fact that it has a Hollywood Video sticker on it, which I think gives it a little bit of extra charm as well. And that, my friends, is Nightmare Creatures. Let's move on to our next game. Our final game on the list today is Body Harvest. This game is so cool and a very interesting piece of history. In this game, he plays genetically engineered soldier Adam Drake in the future, trying to stop this bug harvest that happens every 25 years. It's your job to go down and stop the alien race from doing what they were destined to do and take them all out. Is this Halo? The game takes place across different time periods where you go to each section of time that the different invasions happened at to stop them at the source. That takes you through World War I, the 40s, the 60s, and the 90s. I think that that's such a cool concept of traveling through time to go wipe out this alien race. And each of these time periods are totally open worlds. Like, you get plopped down, and although you can't access some areas, you can kind of just run around wherever you want, including just, you can get in cars. Just about any car you see, you can hop into and drive around, find missions, talk to other NPCs, get missions from them, learn what to do, and stop the oncoming bug hordes. This is insanely impressive for the N64 and for a lot of games in 1998. Having something this expansive is incredibly impressive, and it definitely has some roughness these days. A lot of that classic N64 fog, but the fact that they were able to squeeze a game of this size onto a cartridge is incredibly cool. This game was developed by DMA Design, and you may not know that name because they eventually turned their production studio into Rockstar North, which is the team that made Grand Theft Auto. And that makes a lot more sense looking at this, the team that made GTA 3, Vice City, and things like that. It's that open world mission-based gameplay that they sort of evolved and really nailed with GTA 3, but in this weird sci-fi sort of experience for the N64, which is awesome. And you can see where that inspiration comes from. Like I said earlier, being able to hijack just about any car you want, getting an array of weapons to use on the different creatures and monsters, and running around just completing assorted objectives. This clearly has the backbone of what would eventually become the whole Grand Theft Auto series on it. One thing this game does suffer with a little bit, though, is direction. It does technically tell you where to go on the map, but it doesn't make it very clear how to get there, and sometimes you'll have to complete a puzzle, or a different mission, or talk to another character to progress to the next space, and they don't really make it clear where that is. They just tell you, it's over there, and you're like, alright. I got lost a decent amount of times in this game, which is a little bit frustrating. I would say this might be what I would consider a guide game, where it's handy to have a walkthrough or a guide, or even if you could find some sort of map to have with you while you play, that might come in handy. And if you don't want to use a guide, if you want to keep it to yourself, nothing wrong with that. Maybe I'm just dumb. That's very, very plausible. As for the price, I paid around $30 for this game, and I think that's insanely worth it. If you can push that, then you're getting a piece of what would eventually become Grand Theft Auto, and just to have a open world action game on the N64 is one of the coolest experiences to have. Seeing what a game of that magnitude, something that feels a little bit more like a modern game, structured around, 1998. So seriously, do yourself a favor and pick up Body Harvest. I think out of all the games I've covered here, this is one of my highest recommendations. Thank you so much for watching. That was once again a very fun experience. Please, as always, in the comments, let me know what your forgotten games are on the N64, or otherwise if we want to start leaning in that direction. Because I want to know what games you think fell by the wayside that deserve more attention. Thanks to everyone who left a comment for the games that were shown off in this video. I always like hearing recommendations or getting reminded of other titles myself. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, that helps out a lot, and subscribe if you want to keep up to when I do more of these and for the other cool stuff that I get to do. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey buddy, you here to talk about N64 games? Say hi to the camera. No? That right there? Yeah, that! Hey, buddy.